everyone, I have some hot off the press information from two of you, and I've got you to thank. Sorry, I'm looking for your name. I've got you both to thank for it, and I'm going to dedicate this video to both of you for letting me know about this. This is about the quite surprising news which came out at the end of this week, which is that the Chanel flagship store in London, Bond Street, has been put up for sale. And that, when you told me it, I couldn't believe it. I went onto Google. I mean, I did believe you, but I just was like, this is kind of quite worrying. Not from the point of view of, oh, sorry, I can't get any more bags. It's not that. I'm talking about from an economic point of view. This is potentially quite concerning. So really quickly, before I give you an overview, I need to thank Andrew Evans. You were the first person I saw that let me know about this. And actually, Andrew, you always comment on most videos, and everything that you have to say is also always so relevant, and you always add something. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Cinzia on Instagram, who wrote to me and let me know as well. And I think Cinzia, I'm seeing your name a lot now as well in the comments. So I thank both of you, and for anyone who also wrote to me and told me and I didn't see your comment, thank you too. So here's the information. The Chanel Bond Street store, the flagship, has been put up for sale by the Swedish pension fund that owns it. This is big news. This is, to give you an idea, this is like the flagship 31 Rue Cambon store in Paris being closed down, but all of the smaller boutiques throughout Paris staying open. Bond Street in London is, well, it was last year anyway, 2019, one of 3 of the most expensive retail streets globally to have a store on. And it's expensive because of footfall through the area, revenue and profits that you can get off it. It's kind of one of those areas that is affluent. Certainly from a tourist point of view, it's one of the places that you're probably going to want to go, along with the likes of Harrods and Selfridges. And all of the stores, all of the luxury stores have congregated there and have their flagships there. So as a shopper, or as a tourist shopper, it's a one-stop shop for all of those big brands. If you don't want to go into a department store, you want to have the full experience, you want to have access to as much stock as possible. Very often in department stores, you'll go in there and they don't have stuff, whereas you go into the flagships and they normally tend to have a bigger selection, and the experience is kind of slightly more theatre than you might necessarily get in a smaller boutique. Now, the store that Chanel is in is 3 stories, and they took on the lease for that back in either 2010 or 2013. I think it was 2010, and then they renovated, but they opened in 2013. They paid 5 million for a 25-year lease. That lease, to have been broken this early in the contract, is really potentially quite concerning. We don't know the full information, so it's really hard to kind of speculate at the moment, but I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts on it. And some of the things that I think it could be, not necessarily all bad actually, so you can let me know what you think. When Chanel took on this store, back in, let's call it 2010, austerity in the UK was still underway, and the credit crunch, which happened in the late 2000s, we were still kind of feeling the effects of it. But with that credit crunch, and I'm going to talk to you in 1 second about that, and how I think that is going to be really different to the recession caused by the pandemic. That credit crunch didn't have quite the same dent on the luxury industry as I think this one is going to have. And there is one reason for that, and I think it's to do with travel. In some countries, closed borders, can't travel at all, in or out. A lot of people put off by traveling, but also going to the shops because of the whole PPE thing. I know for a lot of us, it's kind of taken the fun out of shopping, really, what with all these new precautions. So in 2010, Chanel were not the only luxury brand to spend big on retail premises. McLaren actually took on, I couldn't find out how much they spent on it, but 2010 was when McLaren, the car brand, took on their luxury space in Knightsbridge, which is also, that's not going to be cheap. It backs onto Hyde Park. It's kind of opposite to Harrods. It's in Knightsbridge, which is a really affluent area. So as you can see there, from those 2 examples, although you had austerity and the end of what was the recession, luxury brands still had that ability to kind of move and spend, because although they had been, of course, slightly impacted by the recession, travel meant they were still getting spend from people traveling in from abroad, namely from Asia, from you guys in Asia. In this instance, travel has stopped, so I think that's going to have a massive impact. Coming all the way back to 2020, what I think is going on with the Chanel store. Here's the reason why I think at this point we can't really assume that it's all doom and gloom and really bad. Chanel at this point, so the Swedish pension fund who own it, they're looking to sell it. They don't want to be renting it anymore. They want to sell it. They're looking for offers in excess of 240 million, which, I wrote this down, is $315 million. There's already interest from the Abu Dhabi royal family, as well as local private investors. Now, we don't know. Those private investors might continue with Chanel's lease on the place. Secondary, it's not been ruled out yet whether Chanel will just decide to buy the premise themselves. From what I can see, from what I've read, at this point, it's not categorically a case of Chanel saying, oh, we're going to go broke, we've got to move out. It's to do with the firm that own the place. I think there's a few reasons why they might be doing this at this point. The first reason is, if we're not in recession, there is one very near on the horizon. And by the way, I'm going to talk to you in a second as to recessions and why they are not always doom and gloom, and there are things you can do. Many a millionaire has been made in a recession, so it's good to have your ducks in a row. I'll talk to you about that in a second, and things I learned from the last one. But don't always be really scared of it. It can be scary. I'm not saying that, but it can also be a leveler. Footfall around the west of London, but also in the city, is down by 60%. This has been caused by early on in the pandemic. Lockdown happened, and you don't have any office workers. Everyone's working from home. Office workers are the people that will go out for lunch. They might buy a sandwich, or they might go and eat in a restaurant. And also office workers are the people frequenting shops, as well as tourists and local people on their day off or whatever it is they're choosing to do. But office workers make up a really big portion of people spending money and keeping the cogs going in that area. When lockdown eased, I think things are starting to change a bit now, but when lockdown eased, a lot of people continued to work from home. So although you would have had a slight increase in people going back into the office, it wouldn't have been anywhere near the original numbers before the lockdown. On top of that, Bond Street alone has had a 73% decrease in footfall. That is massive. Can you imagine the effect that will be having on revenue and profits? I was really curious about this from the point of view of what is an average annual turnover for that area, Bond Street, and what might it be now. And I found this information. So stores in the Bond Street, in Bond Street, have an annual average turnover, so collectively, of around 10 million. Which is $13.2 billion. March to year end, so year end predictions at this point, they're expecting sales to have fallen to £2.5 billion. That is $3.3 billion. That drop is huge, and it's not sustainable. If you're spending that much on leases and rents, and to have sales drop by that much, it's not sustainable in the long term. This could even be a strategic sale. So for example, that Swedish pension fund, something might have happened with them, they might need the money. But also, from another point of view, this could also be strategic, what with them thinking there's definitely going to be a recession. If we'd sold the store a year ago, we'd have made a lot more money on it. But a year ago, we wouldn't have sold it because we didn't know there was going to be a recession. So that it might be them trying to jump before things get really deep. It might be them at this point trying to get as much money for it right now as they can. Chanel also did that cheeky price rise back in, was it April or May? Do you remember they did that price rise? And it wasn't a small one either. It was kind of between 7 and 25%. And it was on different products, and the percentages tended to go up on the more popular items, classic flaps and things like that. Now, I remember when I spoke about that in the spring, I think for a lot of us, it wasn't so much the price rise that anyone had a problem with, because price rises happen. It was more the timing of it, because it felt really insensitive. But then they're a business. They don't care about insensitive. They care about staying afloat, and that makes complete sense. And I wonder whether that was an insight back at the time. I also think as well, I was thinking about this the other day, the Dior price rise that also happened, I feel like that slid under the radar, because they waited until June to do it. They kind of waited until the heat had come out of lockdown and everyone was like, oh God, like this is the new normal. And I feel that they did it at a point where everyone was distracted maybe by things starting to open back up again. And it also, the price hikes weren't as high as what Chanel had done. But I don't know, it was just something I was thinking of. Let me know what you think about that price rise and whether you think that bears any reflection on business, because don't forget as well, I'm really surprised that Chanel are still not selling online, because a lot of these other brands do, and surely right now, if there is any time to sort out your online presence, now would be the time. But yeah, it's weird, I don't know why. I'm gonna tell you about the late 2000 recession, how it impacted me, what I learned from it, and how I think it's going to differ massively to this recession that's coming. So in the late 2000s, I got my first job, and I'd never worked through a recession before. Obviously I knew what they were, because you know, when one would happen, and they tend to happen every 10 years, don't they? Whenever one would happen, obviously I'd witnessed my family kind of going through it and the ups and downs of it, but I'd never actually worked through one myself. So when there were murmurs of it happening, in kind of 2007, 2008, I was nervous about it, but I didn't really know what to expect. When it actually happened, what I learnt very quickly is that it kind of felt like I'd taken a 50% pay cut, even though I hadn't. So I had, the job I had at the time, I was paid really good for my age. I mean, I borderline fluked that job, to be honest. And I was so glad in the end, because there was redundancies going on everywhere, not just in the company I worked in, but loads of one of my friends completely lost her job and ended up in a real pickle, had to move back home, live with her mum. It was, everyone that I knew was struggling massively. And at the time, I was the only breadwinner, so I had really big responsibility on me to keep my job, get the money, but to sort out shopping and bills and stuff like that. And inflation meant that petrol, food, eating out, everything just got so expensive. And one thing that always sticks in my mind was, it was midsummer, and I'd finished work on this particular day. I was in the car, I was stuck in a traffic jam, I had all of the windows open, and I was sat in the car thinking, how long is this gonna go on for? Because this is horrific, not the traffic jam, the recession. I had no petrol at the time, and I was kind of on a hope and a prayer as to whether I was even gonna make it to the petrol station, which was like 200 yards down the road. I was roasting, but I couldn't afford to put the aircon on, and I knew I needed to go and get food after, so there was a Sainsbury's kind of couple of roads down. Got to the petrol station, put in like £4.99 worth of petrol. It was so expensive. And I then went to the Sainsbury's. At that time, food was just so crazy expensive. Now the difference between that recession and this one that I see, that recession, as I mentioned, was caused by like subprime mortgages, banking, and then the falling down of the banking system. The difference with this one's caused by a pandemic, but the pandemic itself isn't what's going to cause the recession. It's all of the things that the pandemic has caused that's going to cause the recession. Travel, international travel, I see as being the biggest killer here. If you think about it, tourism and all of us going to each other's countries and spending money, that's what helps, one of the things that helps keep money flowing. Certainly in the UK, you guys in Asia make up a massive proportion of revenue that comes in, particularly to the luxury sector in London, even places like Bicester Village. Add to that a lot of the wealthy in London, this is actually information I got on the FT, I think. A lot of the wealthy in London are reported to have kind of retreated to places that they might have in the country, as well as like holiday homes. So those people also aren't in town. And add to that, those who might once have gone shopping are now potentially, I think I see a lot of people that are put off shopping due to all of the new rulings and PPE. It's not the fun thing that it used to be. In summary, I don't think at this point we've got enough information to know whether Chanel are doing badly, so badly they can't afford to stay there anymore. They might still at this point choose to buy that premise, or they might choose to be moving to another premise also on Bond Street. I think the fact that the building is being sold is probably also to do with the investor that owns it, who might be thinking, there could be, yeah, there's gonna be a recession, let's sell it now, offload it now, and make as much money now as we can, as opposed to leaving it another year when things might have got worse and we'll get even less for it. So I don't think it's necessarily terrible. I think if Chanel don't buy it and they don't move to another flagship, then I think it's kind of quite concerning. But I think at this point, it doesn't sound like it's too much to do with Chanel. It sounds like it's more to do with the people that actually own the building. Let's keep an eye on it. I'm really interested to know where this one goes. I'm really interested to know whether Chanel do decide to relocate or buy the place. If any of you have got any further information, please write it below. I would also love it actually if you could share your thoughts on recession, particularly if you are someone who, during any recession, going back to whenever, if you're someone who it actually worked out for whatever reason, maybe you invested in property when it hit the skids, or you came up with an idea that worked out really well. I'd really love to know, and I think I always on this channel want to keep things positive. So if you can share any things that have worked for you, or any tips that have helped you as well, or just anything you think about this Chanel situation, leave those comments below. Thank you, and I'm going to go and talk to you below now.